Let's talk about a second-year player on the rise, and that's Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. Last year, we had 9 second-year running backs finish as top 24 scorers at the running back position. This year, there's obvious year 2 backs like Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Devon Achane, and they've all sort of cemented their place as foundational pieces of dynasty rosters and top 2 round picks in redraft. But Chase Brown is a player that continues to gain value. Brown hit the second highest miles per hour of any player in the NFL last year. This is an explosive player in an offense that he is going to thrive in. And Chase Brown has had nothing but positive drum beats in terms of training camps and OTAs. He's been signaled out by Zach Taylor as a guy who has improved in his pass blocking ability. Exactly the sort of praise we want to see for a back who can catch passes like Brown. This is going to be a fun player this year. Expect him to gain more dynasty value over the first month of the NFL season.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
What's going on? This is Theo Gremminger for Fantasy Points, here to tell you about some players who gained and lost dynasty value this summer. And there's a number of players who could have made this list, but there's several players who really stood out and several players who we have a lot of concerns about. And let's just talk about them right now. Let's start out with a player who gained a ton of value, and that's Jayden Daniels. Jayden Daniels was the number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft, the Heisman Trophy winner, the savior at the quarterback position for the Washington Commanders franchise. And it's been nothing but positive drum beats for Daniels all offseason long. There's been nothing but praise coming out from the beat reporters, from veteran Commanders players, the coaching staff. Daniels looks like he is being fast-tracked for success in Washington, and the redraft and best ball market have reflected that. Daniels is being drafted as a quarterback 1 in both formats right now, and that's having an effect on his dynasty price. Year 1 stats matter too for our rookie quarterbacks, and Jayden Daniels is a player where if you drafted him in a dynasty startup this past offseason, you're feeling really, really good about the price you paid, because a lot of dynasty managers who took him in startups were able to get Daniels at like the 2-3 turn, late second round prices. Now he's starting to go ahead of guys like Joe Burrow, ahead of guys like Kyler Murray and Justin Herbert in dynasty startup prices. And it's pretty easy to see why. Daniels looked fantastic in Washington's preseason win over New York. He flashed incredible talent, connects with Diami Brown on a 42-yard downfield pass, and then finds the end zone on a zone read. Washington Jayden Daniels looked like LSU Jayden Daniels. And this looks like a player where when we get to the end of the season, he is going to be a lock to be selected in the first round of Superflex Dynasty startup drafts. Jayden Daniels, a huge offseason winner. And just because he was drafted number 1 doesn't mean we can't signal out Caleb Williams as another player who's gained dynasty value this offseason. He had already surged into like the top 8 quarterback rankings in dynasty startup value, but this might end up looking like a discount because Williams is being fast-tracked to be an absolute superstar. He's the real deal, and the Bears have surrounded him with talent to fast-track his success. Like Jayden Daniels, Williams is being selected as a QB1 in redraft. There's no tempered expectations. Nobody's slow playing Caleb Williams. This is a player who's going to challenge for Chicago Bears passing records as a rookie. And at the end of the year, if Caleb Williams has the sort of season like he is capable of, then he is going to be in the conversation for top 4 dynasty QB prices. You're talking about a player who is capable of cracking the big 4 of Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and CJ Stroud. Unheard of. But Caleb Williams is being fast-tracked for that sort of success in year 1. And if any player is capable of cracking that big 4, it's Caleb Williams. He's going to absolutely smash this season. And one of the reasons Caleb Williams is going to smash this year is his teammate in Chicago, Rome Odunze. And Odunze is a player where you were seeing him in certain rookie dynasty drafts. You were getting him at a discount because there was dynasty managers who were a little bit scared off of last year's Jackson Smith and Jigba production when we talked about Rome Odunze being a possible number 3 target in an offense. Being boxed out by DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, that was sort of the early talk when he was drafted by the Bears. But with Odunze, you get a player who's attached to an exceptional talent in Caleb Williams for a long time. You're going to have the Odunze-Williams connection is going to be a correlation play that both dynasty and redraft managers are going to want on their teams. And with Odunze, even with having veterans like DJ Moore and Keenan Allen in town, Odunze still seems like he's being fast-tracked for year one success. He has flashed in the preseason already, connecting with Williams on big plays. And pretty much, if you're following fantasy Twitter, you're seeing Odunze highlight after Odunze highlight. This is a proper alpha wide receiver 1, and the sort of player that it's going to be very difficult for NFL offensive coordinators not to feature in the offense. So despite the target competition, Odunze has gained value. He is going ahead of DJ Moore, his teammate, last year's wide receiver 6 overall in PPR. Odunze is going ahead of him in dynasty startups. And it makes sense. Odunze is going to be a special player as a Bear. He's gained value already. And with Odunze, there's going to be less pressure on him to perform in year one to the levels of fellow rookies like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors. Odunze can gain value simply by flashing his talent and producing at an acceptable level. He doesn't have the pressure on him to be a wide receiver 1. He just needs to show that he is a mega talent that he is. And there's going to be some spike weeks in there too. Rome Odunze definitely on the rise. And let's talk about a second-year player on the rise, and that's Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. Last year, we had 9 second-year running backs finish as top 24 scorers at the running back position. This year, there's obvious year 2 backs like Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Devon Achane, and they've all sort of cemented their place as foundational pieces of dynasty rosters and top 2 round picks in redraft. But Chase Brown is a player that continues to gain value. He has speed and pass catching ability in an offense that utilizes their backs as pass catchers. In 2022, which was Joe Burrow's last full season as starter, he targeted Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine a combined 126 times. This is exactly the sort of usage that we want to see for a player like Brown. Now, with Brown, this is a guy who we have a very small sample size on, but it is promising sample size. Brown hit the second highest miles per hour of any player in the NFL last year. This is an explosive player in an offense that he is going to thrive in. And Chase Brown has had nothing but positive drum beats in terms of training camps and OTAs. He's been signaled out by Zach Taylor as a guy who has improved in his pass blocking ability. Exactly the sort of praise we want to see for a back who can catch passes like Brown. This is going to be a fun player this year. Expect him to gain more dynasty value over the first month of the NFL season. Let's go back to the rookie wide receiver well with Xavier Worthy. Now, Xavier Worthy ends up in an absolute dream situation in Kansas City. You're talking about, hey, we've seen this before, where a really, really fast wide receiver thrives next to Patrick Mahomes. Now, it's a lot to put on Xavier Worthy to say that he's going to be the next Tyreek Hill, and we don't need to do that. But maybe he could be peak Deshaun Jackson in the Kansas City offense. I think that's a fair comparison and an outcome that I think we could see happen. Worthy is going to also have a larger role out the gate than anticipated because Hollywood Brown is already banged up. When Kansas City plays Baltimore in game 1, expect for Xavier Worthy to be in 2 wide receiver sets alongside Rashee Rice. Worthy is already putting pressure on NFL defenses. We saw it in the preseason against Detroit, where Worthy caught 3 passes for 62 yards and a touchdown and had an 11-yard run. This is the type of player where all eyes in fantasy are going to be on him every time the Chiefs play. He is going to be a must-see player every time he steps on the field. This is a player who's just gaining dynasty value every single time we see him in the preseason. Very exciting about Xavier Worthy attached to Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. It's going to be awesome. And if you have him on your dynasty roster, throw him in your starting lineup. This is a guy who screams spike week potential. Let's go back to the running back spot, and let's talk about our only third-year player. And this is an interesting one, and this is Kenneth Walker. And Walker has been a player where we've sort of been very happy to have him on our dynasty rosters, but he hasn't done anything like win us a championship. He averaged 13.3 points per game last year, which was identical to his 13.5 points per game during his rookie season. And he scored 9 touchdowns in back-to-back years. Now, in terms of his dynasty value, this has been sort of a weird player. He had a period of time between the end of his rookie season and the 2023 NFL draft where his dynasty value was through the roof. But then Seattle made the shocking selection of Zach Charbonnet in the second round, and Walker lost all this value. The new coaching staff, though, seems to be wanting to feature Walker. He's been signaled out by new offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb as a guy who is a really, really talented, powerful back, and he called him a 3-tool guy. He said that he is electric out of the backfield as a pass catcher. And this is really an interesting thing for Grubb to say because Walker has never cracked 30 receptions at any point in his career. So if this coaching staff can turn him from a 30 reception guy, a sub 30 reception guy, into a 50-plus reception guy, then you're talking about a very high ceiling for Walker, and this could finally be his career year. This is a player where no one is questioning the talent of Ken Walker, but now he's finally in a situation where the coaching staff is going to feature him and he is going to excel. Now, we talked about a few players who gained value. Let's talk about some who lost it. And let's stay in Seattle. Let's talk about Ken Walker's teammate, and that's Zach Charbonnet. So Zach Charbonnet, there was some steam early in the offseason thinking that the new coaching staff would provide him an increased role where maybe this new coaching staff would want to utilize Charbonnet a little bit more. But all indications are that this is Walker's backfield, and Charbonnet is really a contingent upside, next man in type handcuff. The gap between the two backs' usage might actually increase this year, and that's a scary thought because last year, Charbonnet, despite leading Seattle in running back receptions and edging Walker in yards per carry, he was out-carried 219 to 108. So if that number remains the same, it's going to be really difficult for Charbonnet to gain any sort of value. And really, you're starting to see this reflected in the trade market. Charbonnet is a guy who you can get in a lot of leagues right now for a 2025 third-round pick. This was unheard of a year ago. Charbonnet was a guy that was actually steaming up and gaining value. An early second-round pick in the 2023 NFL draft. This is a guy who had the two-way ability, and Pete Carroll seemed to love. Well, a new coaching staff, they're on Walker, and Charbonnet, he's really more of a handcuff now than a handcuff plus. Not a great outcome. He's still a useful player to have on your dynasty value, but he probably needs an injury to make a big impact. And one player who looks like he might be toast is Marvin Mims. Now, Tim Patrick is now a Detroit Lion, so there's a little bit more of a window for Mims to get onto the field, but it just doesn't seem like he's ever going to fit with what Sean Payton wants to do. Last year, we saw 2 early 20 and 16-point weeks early in the year for Mims, but he had a 50% snap rate only twice all season long. And this is a player that never really got going and actually saw his usage decrease as the season moved along. Now, this offseason, Jerry Jeudy traded, and it seemed like Mims had a window. signings like Josh Reynolds and draft picks like Troy Franklin and Devon Vele, they didn't really do anything to kind of hurt Mims. In fact, people were painting a picture that this is going to be a Mims breakout. But early on, it doesn't look that way. It looks like Sean Payton is going to use Mims more as a clear out guy than a featured guy. There's minimal wide receiver target competition, but Mims looks like a guy where if you can get something for him in a dynasty trade, I would take it, because this is going to be another lost year for Marvin Mims unless Sean Payton has a big change of heart. And we talked about Chase Brown and all those year 2 running backs, but one year 2 running back who's really looking to be on the downward slope is Kendre Miller. Kendre Miller was selected ahead of Devon Achane and Tyjae Spears in the 2023 NFL draft. He was a 20-year-old back out of TCU with two-way ability. People were getting very excited about Kendre Miller, but Kendre Miller just cannot get going. Played only 8 games last year and never posted a 30% snap share. Then he gets injured on the first day of training camp, and he has gotten eviscerated by Dennis Allen. Any chance Allen gets a chance to talk about him, this is not very positive vibes on Kendre Miller. Miller is a player where it looks like 2024 could be a repeat of 2023, and this could be another lost year for Kendre Miller. It just might not ever happen for him in New Orleans. You've also got the threat not only of Alvin Kamara, but of increased usage for Taysom Hill, with Taysom Hill being a de facto RB2. So Miller's going to get boxed out in terms of snaps and in terms of the coaching staff's faith in him. Really, really tough player to trust on your dynasty roster. And then we're going to talk about Christian Kirk, because I could have included Brian Thomas as one of the offseason winners and a guy who's gained a lot of value in dynasty, but he just missed. But that doesn't mean he hasn't had a big effect on Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk had one of the shocking wide receiver 1 seasons we've seen in quite some time in 2022. Signed as a free agent out of Arizona, ends up in Jacksonville, averages 14.5 points per game. Then last season, he starts off strongly despite the added target competition from Calvin Ridley, who Jacksonville acquired in a trade the season before. But a mid-year calf injury caused Christian Kirk to miss time and derailed his second half production. His points per game average dropped almost 2 points per game from 2022 to 2023. And then this past offseason, there was a window where Kirk looked like he's going to gain some steam. Calvin Ridley signs with Tennessee, but then Jacksonville adds Gabe Davis in free agency. Not necessarily something that's going to hurt Kirk that much, but then the real addition that's hurting Kirk is Brian Thomas Jr., who's absolutely looks like the real deal, projects way more to be an alpha, and BTJ looks like a player who might outscore Christian Kirk this year. It started to be reflected on Christian Kirk's redraft price, which is dropping like a stone. And conversely, this is a guy where he's gone from a sort of a high floor player that you can plug into your dynasty starting lineup into a guy that you really won't be able to trust that often. Jacksonville was only in 11 personnel 63% of the time last year. And if they're going to utilize Davis and BTJ in 2 wide receiver tandems, with Kirk kind of filling in the slot as needed, this is going to be a guy where he might go from a solid player that you want on your roster to really a little bit more of a roster clogging low-end wide receiver 3. Christian Kirk is definitely heading downward, and the main reason is Jacksonville has a brand new wide receiver 1 in Brian Thomas. And not to mention, Travis Etienne is going to be utilized as a pass catcher, and Evan Engram might lead the NFL in tight end targets this year. And sort of the saddest player to talk about on this list, but we got to talk about him, JJ McCarthy. Injuries are unfair, but they're a major driver of dynasty values. And this year, instead of getting to see JJ McCarthy on an NFL field, you're going to see him on the sidelines. Season over. Now, this could have been a season where McCarthy started off the year as a backup behind Sam Darnold, then at some point would have had an opportunity as a starter. Now it's all back to the drawing board, and McCarthy's main focus is going to be on his recovery. There's some silver linings here. McCarthy could use this redshirt year to learn the ins and outs of an NFL season, but he's going to return in 2025 as the probable starting quarterback with a lot more pressure on him as a year 2 player than a rookie, even though he's missing the entire season. And from a pure dynasty rankings perspective, you've got fellow rookies like Bo Nix and Drake May, who are each have the opportunity to gain considerable value. Then you've got, not to mention guys like Caleb Williams and Jayden Daniels who are locked in. Then you've got year 2 quarterbacks like Bryce Young and Will Levis. And these guys have a chance to rebound in like new and promising situations. So McCarthy has a lot of players that could leap ahead of him in terms of his dynasty ranking. It's unfair, but that's football. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope if you disagree with some of these dynasty ups and downs, guys who've gained value and lost value, let us know in the comments. If you like this video, hit the like button and look for videos like this all season long that are going to help you with your dynasty rosters.